Hello, welcome to the Modcast. I'm Dueling Grox. I've been a moderator of this subreddit for a short while, and I'm happy to be here today.
Hi, I'm Stinger. I've been a moderator on our UFOs since 2022, and I've been interested in the topic since the 2000s. I am excited to do the Modcast because I like to show kind of a human face to the moderators and show that we are people interested in the topic just like you are, just like our users are.
Hey everyone, I'm Let's Talk UFOs on the subreddit. My name's Michael. I've been interested in UFOs for as long as I can remember, and I've been a moderator for just a few years.
I am VCA Master on the sub. Been a moderator for a while. I am a skeptical experiencer, and I'm just hanging out with some other UFO moderator friends talking about UFOs.
First thing I wanted to just jump into was some of the feedback we had on just the Modcast in general. I mean, we got some posts on the Metasub. People were really skeptical and critical of why we would do this if we were monetizing it, and just sort of why we would prioritize this over moderating, and some general woes, I think, in terms of the state of the subreddit. We can talk about that separately, but I just wanted to affirm that we have no intentions of monetizing this ever at any point for any reason, and that will get put up in the description if it isn't already. And just speak to some of our personal reasons, I think, for doing it. Because it's one thing to say why we're, what we're not going to do, and then it's another thing to completely differently to say why we would be interested in the first place. Like, these people are my friends. I love the mod team. Being able to interact with them in a more intentional way about this thing that we're all passionate about is awesome. And this is kind of just a more formalized way for us to share how we think about the topic, talk to each other like in a more concrete way, and parse through our thoughts, because it's a lot. I mean, I think anyone that's been following it for as long as some of us have, it's a lot to keep up with. There's so much of it that I don't know. I don't claim to be an expert in it at all. I only feel like I get closer to the truth and a better understanding when I'm put in a situation like this and I get to express some of my thoughts and hear how other people think about it. And that's all I want, really. If other people get something out of that, great. But what about you guys? How would you contextualize, what brings you to do it?
Yeah, I mean, I said it before. I just kind of want to show that basically the moderators are also Redditors, that we are also people who are interested in the topic, kind of to show a human face and to show that we're like the users. We're into UFOs, spend our time, we volunteer our time, just like we volunteer some of our time removing insults from the comment section. We decided to volunteer some of our time to do this Modcast as well. Some of our sister subs like UFOB have similar efforts, and we just thought we would try as well.
Yeah, which isn't to say, my experience of the default is that like you're kind of a spook until proven otherwise. So UFOB, the other sub, like sister subreddit we have, like it's much smaller than UFOs, but they've been doing a podcast for years and they don't monetize it, and they do great work. There's a bunch of them in there, and they've been highlighting all sorts of things and doing all sorts of interviews. I think it's a good example. Not to say that then by default, everyone should assume we're doing it for the same reasons. It's just that it can be done. And I don't think it should surprise anyone that we have a lot of thoughts about the subject. And yeah, we love talking about it, I think, just like anyone would.
One of the reasons why I like doing this Modcast is mostly to hear from you guys. I get to hear, as being part of the moderator team, I get to see the Discord messages back and forth. And oftentimes my own opinion on the veracity of a certain case is changed by one of the other moderators. And since everyone volunteers their time to do this, you can also tell that the passion is behind it. And so what's really neat is that, no one is always right all the time, but I get really high quality opinions and research, and just they bring their own filters to it. And so that helps me to try to uncover the truth. And so the reason why I like to be a part of this is to help others, hopefully, if they find that useful. Because if someone's going about taking a lot of their time volunteering to moderate, they must be passionate about the subject, and therefore they might be able to glean a lot of meaningful insights from the large amounts of data that they've seen, which is probably a different data set than anyone else has seen. So it's like everyone is their own treasure trove. So that's why I enjoy hearing from the other moderators, and that's why I'm a part of the sub. I oftentimes don't have much of opinion to bring to the table, but I do have some technical skills like stabilizing video. So I kind of like to be a fly on the wall most of the part, but I do think that that's helpful for me, and I hope for others to uncover the truth.
Yeah, I think just having a person talking to you is a lot easier to get an impression of that person than, just text on Reddit. I think people pretty easily fall into like a conspiratorial view of us as moderators, whether it's, we're feds or whether we're shills or whatever it is. Like, I just wanted to give people a chance to see us being real people and talking. And that's a much better impression of a person ordinarily than text is. So that was one of my big driving motives to be on this podcast.
And we're not monetizing it. We're never monetizing it. That should not be an issue. Yeah.
Well, this probably dovetails into just the general overall state of the sub, since one of the other gripes or points was that we should be prioritizing the sub rather than doing some sort of content creation. And I mean, the general pushback is we're volunteers. We can technically do whatever we want. Like, I think the argument kind of behooves, why isn't that user applying to be a moderator and doing the same thing that they're touting to? At the same time, I can totally understand wanting us to have a balance. And so, you would have to, I think you'd have to gauge each person and participant individually. How much effort are they putting in to moderating? And then how are they balancing that with whatever else they're participating in? I mean, I don't wake up and go to bed thinking about moderating the subreddit, but I definitely spend time on it every day for myself. And I feel like it's a part-time job. So I feel like I take it seriously enough and contribute regularly enough that it warrants just recording a conversation that I would realistically have normally or already have normally, right? So it's just doing it in a more intentional way. I did want to chat about just the state of the subreddit, since it's changed a little bit in the past couple of weeks. We've gotten 14 new moderators in the last month. I think it's 2 weeks now. We've had the queue down and zeroed out pretty consistently. And the subject overall, the whole space seems like it's died down. Like, things have gotten really quiet now that Jake Barber's story has kind of been digested. And I know there's a couple things on the horizon. There's just been no bombshells or like huge anticipatory waves. And so this doesn't mean the fundamental issues have been quote unquote solved. Like, there's still, I think, the same underlying dynamics of kind of discontent or the dialectics that kind of fuel the toxicity that we still need to work on or try to find a way to combat more from a moderation perspective. But we're not up against the wall. It feels like it doesn't feel like there's a million extra people in the subreddit just hammering away, adding noise. But I'd be curious what your guys' perception is, from your standpoint as moderators and how you've been looking at it.
The queue was filled up. It felt like forever. And so it was a daunting task to try to do something meaningful. And especially when you're trying to properly do that, checking all the links and actually reading the entire conversation, not having enough people actively on it, it makes sense. But yeah, then the toxicity seems to rise, right? And so now it's at a manageable level. And so hopefully we can keep this momentum. So that has spurred me to be more proactive in my methods of moderating, just because I want to see it at this level and I want it to be sustainable. It is frustrating when you see all these things distracting you from, hey, I just want to know what this thing is or whatever, you know what I mean? And then we divert the conversation to something that doesn't seem constructive toward the end of uncovering the truth.
Yeah, this is the first time we've consistently reviewed all the posts on the subreddit. And I mean, we've tried in the past, but this is the longest we've been able to keep up with it. So I think I just can't think of a more significant moving of the goalposts, because that's just something I would want for any subreddit. Not to say that there needs to be an army of curators there, because that's not what we're trying to do. But yeah, I think it just goes a long way to keeping some of the noise out and then allowing us to focus on actually more granular aspects of what is on topic, what is substantial, how can we make things seem less toxic? What are those thresholds? So I think we'll appropriately be able to have the bandwidth to do that now. Hopefully, if we can keep up with it.
Yeah. I mean, our goals overall are keep things on topic, have meaningful conversations, and reduce toxicity. We just want to have meaningful, on topic, and productive conversations about the topic. We're all trying to learn here. We're trying to. I go to the subreddit every day because I want to learn something new. At the same time, if I see an opportunity to teach someone something that I happen to know, that's when I'll leave a comment and I'll share something I know. And I think that's the type of constructive conversation we all want to be having.
Yeah, 100%. So what have you guys been spending your time with or paying attention to? It's been a couple of weeks since we chatted. Yeah. What are you guys watching? What are you guys listening to? What are you learning?
I've been doing a deep dive on UAP Gerb's videos. So I literally have been making a database and transcribing all of his videos. So it's nothing new. It's kind of rehashing old stuff.
Over the last couple of months, I listened to all of the telepathy tapes, and I've been getting more interested in the tangential sort of consciousness psionics type side of stuff. And more recently, just in the past few days, I've been trying to get caught up on all of Dr. John Blitch's interviews that he's given.
Yeah, same.
And who's John Blitch?
He is one of the people who came forward during the News Nation special with Ross Coulthart. He has a handful of degrees. He's an experiencer, and he worked in the military, lieutenant colonel rank. Was in charge of a nuclear battalion, kind of pretty highly credentialed, but is also an experiencer and has some interesting experiences. An encounter with a mantis being highlights to me. Those are kind of one of my interest that I've developed as an interest in mantis being encounters. So shout out to /r mantis encounters subreddit.
What do you think of the Jesse Michaels interview, Grok?
With Gerb, yeah, that was amazing because some of the backstory is that Gerb posted a video that he actually removed a few weeks prior. And that was because of an interaction with Jesse Michaels and one of the whistleblowers. I cannot recall his name right now, but I could pop it up on screen. And so they agreed to remove that. And so I think part of it was Jesse Michaels actually had Gerb on his channel to kind of promote him because Gerb doesn't have too many followers, but his research is amazing. So I was excited to see Gerb up there because Jesse Michaels has the platform and Gerb seems to do like the brute force investigative work in a very specific niche of the topic, which would be nuts and bolts and kind of piecing the government side of things together, government contractors or whatever. So I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm going to actually probably rewatch it 3 or 4 times and then put a transcript online with some cross references in case people are interested. So I was enthralled, but I need to watch it a couple more times.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of him until Tom mentioned him a couple weeks ago. I think it's pretty telling that Jesse titled the episode "The Most Knowledgeable UFO Researcher in the World." I just can't think of higher praise, from someone in general who's active in the field. I mean, Jesse's definitely done the rounds on his own and is a public figure, a knowledgeable one at that. So listening to Gerb, it's like someone has an encyclopedia like covering half their face of all the acronyms, like special programs, all the legacy documentation and figures. It's intimidating, and his content is the same. It's even more compressed with that. I just can't wait to see it grow. It's very obvious he's only 28, and he still has like a full-time normal job as an engineer, but I really hope he can find a way to make it more sustainable for him to just kind of invest even more of his time in it and like to kind of show us what he can do, because that is the type of original, cohesive, detailed research that we're all hungry for and want to see what comes out of. Now that it just seems like there's just so much more information and the ability to corroborate different claims. Super valuable.
So a lot of people have alluded to all the information being open source. And so I think that's what Gerb's doing, is using the open source materials that we all have at our disposal and creating these cross references. That's why I've taken the time to go through line by line the whole transcript to then cross reference those terms and to correct them, because the auto transcribe, because like you said, his videos are so dense, I need to see it visually in a mind map. That's why I've adopted an Obsidian kind of layout for the files, and it allows you to kind of see a map of the correlated tags. Because it's too much, it's intimidating for me. The only way I could do and visualize it was to use tools, which I assume Gerb just has it in his head, which is impressive. Like you said, let's talk.
Yeah, I can't say it enough. I think UAP Gerb is like the best UAP YouTuber this era. I can't get enough of his content. It's so information dense. It's so well researched. I learn so much in every one of his videos, even if it's a case that I've already heard about a bunch of times.
Speaking of open source, he at least claims to not use people he can't name in his reporting, in his documentaries. I think he might have done that a couple times, but for the most part, if people tell him stuff off the record, he doesn't rely on that info as, part of his reporting.
Yeah, and we noticed when they were talking about Lazar, he acknowledged that he hadn't leaned to producing content on Lazar as much. He was just aware of his bias for wanting to believe Bob. And I think anytime someone's able to be self-aware enough to kind of reflect on their own internal bias and be comfortable being transparent about that, it's a good sign. No one's immune to it. I mean, I think everyone has a bias when they're approaching this subject. And so, as long as you can acknowledge it, it's okay, as long as you're not completely closed off to new information or it blocks your ability to communicate. I wondered what you guys thought of, if you picked up on the indirect interaction he said he had with Greer, because he had never spoken to Greer, but he had been going through Greer's sort of cadre of witnesses, and there was something new or someone new that was added.
At the tail end of 2024, there was a recent entry on the archive. This was a brand new person. This was the Army Public Affairs person that I talked about recently. I contacted this person. We struck up a relationship. This guy's an amazing person. But right when we started talking, he was suspicious of my motives, of course, because I reach out and I just said, hi, I found your name this way, this way, this way. Because whenever I reach out to somebody from the archive, I say, hey, this is where the breach of security happened. This is how I found your name. It will not be shared. I'm not interested in contacting anybody else. But
he reached out to this individual, and then that individual kind of they got off the phone, and then he called him back 10 minutes later and just confronted him and asked Gerb if he was a Fed.
I said, what? So apparently this guy, when we hung up off the phone, he then contacted Greer because he was still in contact with Greer. And he gave Greer my full name, which I would prefer if he wouldn't have done that, but that's okay. And then Greer said I was an intelligence asset. So,
and then he said you were not an intelligence. He cleared it up, or he said you were an intelligence.
No,
asset.
Greer said I was an intelligence. Asset.
What is he basing that on?
Nothing.
He's just fucking saying that you're an intelligence.
Yeah, I've never talked to the guy.
Yeah,
and Gerb had to say no, I'm not. Also, why? Because apparently that's what Greer had essentially claimed that he was. And so it's hard to tell exactly what Greer would have said, but it was just so discouraging to hear someone like that just immediately throw shade based on their ability to track someone down.
I can see this basically being a result of Greer being embarrassed. He's got a big ego. Since Gerb sort of uncovered this anonymous witness's name in Greer's own documents, I think that was enough for him to just get, a little bit worked up about it and lash out a bit. Just go straight to this guy is a bad actor. I think that's a bit extreme, but I think he was just caught off guard a little bit.
I think Greer is too paranoid. I can understand why Greer is so paranoid, but to think that you misredacted something on your DPI archive and this 20-something YouTuber managed to track someone down does not mean that person is a CIA agent. I think that was just kind of Greer kind of leaping to conclusions based off of his paranoia.
Those sound like good assessments. It's interesting that Greer does have an ego. That seems to be in his way quite a bit. he wouldn't worry about his image so much. I think he could be received so much better. And I think you're right, VCA. It's kind of too extreme to call Greer a bad actor.
Yeah, it feels like there are layers of image. This specific one that Greer seems to be, it's what I associate with him. That pattern you can't rely on that. We have no way to verify. Again, it's like the spook until proven otherwise. I'm not saying we should lean into that. It's just, yeah, you're not making it easier to trust you if you rely on anonymous sources out of the gate. So
hopefully we're past the point of anonymous sources being the norm. That'd be my wish, is that we get to less of anonymous sources.
Yeah, well, it's also hard to tell how much the prominent figures have already been highly influenced by them, because I would imagine it's a very effective management technique, and that's to have a set of credentials, be part of the intelligence community, go to the researcher, but say, you can't release my name. Here's the thing. Here's the thing that I'll tell you that's real, or even I'll show you a little bit of this document, and then you can either craft whatever form of limited hangout you want, or see how the researcher reacts. I mean, this technically happened to Bledsoe. That's what they were also claiming in the Jesse Michaels, Danny Jones interview, is that I can't remember the name featured in
Tim Taylor?
Yeah, they were talking about, I think, Tim Taylor sending Bledsoe some sort of document and telling him not to share it. And he shares it with his wife. And then within an hour, he gets a phone call like, hey, we told you not to share that. Or I told you not to share that. So in a way, it was a test, maybe. Yeah, did you guys watch much of the Danny Jones with Jesse Michaels interview?
Yeah, I watched the whole thing.
I thought parts of it were fascinating. The points about censorship, YouTube censorship surrounding the Bledsoe interview were interesting. It's inconclusive why YouTube might suppress his interview with Bledsoe if it wasn't breaking any rules. But especially because there's no real way to fundamentally stop. I mean, Bledsoe's been all over the place now. I don't know why. Granted, that was where I first heard of Bledsoe. I wasn't familiar with him before that. So maybe it was a jumping off point or a potential jumping off point, but I just can't think of why in any sort of concrete way he would be so dangerous, right? What do you guys think? I mean, about his stories, pretty unique, but I don't think it's inherent. He's not a traditional whistleblower or someone that had special access to anything other than the phenomena itself, it seems.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Do you think he would just be such a potential generator? I mean, again, maybe I shouldn't posit it as though it was an intentional suppression. There could have been some other reason. It could have been the reverse, right? It could have been they could have seen it being artificially elevated, right? So and then trying to counterbalance that and be like, oh, what if we do this? We just don't know.
Didn't he say something along the lines of YouTube, a person working at YouTube confirming that it was strange, though?
Yes. And they said it was basically whatever it was happening on the quote unquote floor above them. They weren't able to see why it was happening. And something similar had happened to the Grush interview or some other Grush content. Yeah.
Yeah, because you did say earlier, right, that this was in regards to some kind of device to neuralizer type thing where they would wipe their memory. Is that the 10-minute segment that they removed?
They actually theorize in the episode, right, that they think it's more because of who they talked about. Right, because Bledsoe's willing to talk about his relationship with Tim. And so maybe it was Tim stepping in saying, hey, I don't want my name out there this way. Please suppress that. But I'll give it to Tim. He's probably old enough not to know enough about the Streisand effect, right? I mean, now it's just makes it more interesting. It's more intriguing, whether that's happening or not. So I don't know. I don't think it wasn't. Danny didn't express why he chose to cut the neuralizer bit. So that was the bit that he referenced that he cut out of the Bledsoe interview. So this 10-minute chunk where Chris goes into someone showing him a real life neuralizer from the Men in Black, essentially some device that purportedly can wipe your short or long-term memory. And he goes into some detail about the technical components. So they talk about it for 10 minutes, but he cuts it from the interview for whatever reason. It's too spicy or too out there. I mean, Chris is already seeing pretty concrete, real non-human intelligence, if that's not wild enough, why not just throw some other stuff in there? I don't know. Maybe it was too much, but but then he was willing to talk about it on that episode. So it's like, okay, well, yeah, we're not hearing it from Bledsoe directly. What's going to stop Bledsoe from talking about that elsewhere? Also, why, why? I don't know. Maybe he thought it affected Chris's credibility in the context of that episode too much. It's hard to tell.
It's also interesting, the Sean Ryan interview with Bledsoe, they even labeled it the one that wasn't censored or something, because I know a lot of people said that interview was supposed to be published earlier, and then it looks like it got delayed by 2 weeks. So there was some kind of hubbub about that not being published, which is interesting. And I do believe to this date, the Sean Ryan video is still titled "The Video We Didn't Censor," just to clarify, because there was a public outcry. Why are you censoring the Bledsoes type thing?
Yeah, I think it's kind of hard to say if there was even anything related to the content in a direct way that led to that. Because from my perspective as a moderator, the floor above us is the Reddit admins and their bots. And sometimes they remove stuff that just doesn't make any sense. And there's no transparency. They won't answer questions. It's just like some random political comment they'll remove for being against their filters. And it's like, okay, well, if you say so. Seemed pretty benign to me, but so it could have just been some strange procedural thing, but maybe it was censorship. I'm just getting caught up. I was on vacation for a month, so I'm a bit behind.
Yeah.
Just trying to catch up. It's a lot of info that was dumped in the past month. And I'm just glad we got new moderators, and I actually have a chance to catch up a little bit.
Yeah, I'm excited to have bandwidth to do other weird things like work on the bots and do AMAs, right? Because it just hasn't been that way for months. I think we've just been kind of trying to keep our head above water. It's been so noisy.
Yeah. So and granted, I got really sick and was kind of out of commission for a while. I did notice that there was some anticipation with the lead up and then with the announcement of this government secrets declassification task force that was formed by Anna Paulina Luna. I'm not overly optimistic because they don't have subpoena power themselves, and they're only around for 6 months, and they're trying to declassify a whole slew of conspiracy theory related things, at which it seems like UFOs, UAPs are almost added in as an afterthought. There was even one of our top 5 posts this month was a Twitter poll that Nancy Mace put up. And the name of the post was Reality Check, People Don't Care About UFOs, and showed that the results of this Twitter poll, what do you want the Declassification and Transparency Task Force to expose first? 85% of people said the Epstein list, 8% of people said the JFK files, and then UAPs came in last behind that. It's kind of discouraging and kind of speaks to this almost sort of cooling off period that people have commented on or noted. There was a lot of momentum for disclosure, and it feels like it's kind of, maybe stalled a bit. I am optimistic about the documentary that is premiering today, Age of Disclosure, but I've been optimistic about disclosure for decades. So we've seen a lot of disclosures coming, but I did like the post from our prolific poster, Tommy Shelby, PFB, which was a counterpoint. He brought up this YouGov poll where 63% of Americans think the government is hiding with respect to UFOs. So sort of an actual reality check that people do care about UFOs. Maybe the people who specifically follow Nancy Mace and vote in her Twitter polls are more interested in Epstein, if that is in the zeitgeist in Twitter on that moment. But I feel like the interest in UAPs has been sustained. The cover-up goes back decades. This is a topic that I think people have cared about and will continue to care about going forward. I'm always kind of interested in what's going on with respect to kind of official disclosure from a government kind of standpoint.
Yeah, I don't have high hopes for that either. And in part because some of those things have already been on the block for declassification and have already been declassified to some degree. But, there's always red tape that keep a lot of the facts, classified. So I don't see any reason why this would break through that same hurdle that like JFK files have had before. And that poll, the first poll was a poor poll in terms of gauging interest in UFOs. Like, you can't compare UFOs to Kardashians and be like, oh, more people care about Kardashians, so UFOs aren't important. Like, it's just, that doesn't make any sense.
On that topic, did anybody notice that Khloe Kardashian posted on her, I think it was her Instagram story, a picture of Stephen Greer's 2025 disclosure briefing document?
Yeah.
And apparently people popped into the comments and were like, "Oh yeah, Chloe is really into UFOs." And like they're like, but yeah, that's funny.
Well, I don't know if you saw, but just a few days ago, Khloe Kardashian posted an interview with Greer.
I did not see that. Oh my gosh, I have to check that out.
No, I didn't watch it, but yeah, she interviewed him. So I'd love to talk to someone that watched it. I don't know if I have the patience to watch it. I think the poll about what the task force is essentially looking towards, what is more likely to get declassified? The details surrounding the JFK assassination, the Epstein files, or something meaty within the UFO file. I can't think of a collection of things less likely to be declassified. I think it's pretty obvious that if there's something going on, right, that doesn't fit within the official story, the implications are, in terms of the JFK assassination, pretty broad. Even if that happened decades ago, in terms of the Epstein files, I don't know how much time you guys have spent trying to investigate those. I mean, you can look at what's redacted and what's around what's redacted. It's pretty clear. There's just who went to the island, who was captured in that honeypot. Yeah, I think even what's in Virginia Guffrey's memoir, because that was released as part of it was released by a judge because it was part of some court proceedings. But she wrote a memoir, and that's the only way you can obtain it or look at it. I mean, you can find it anywhere, but yeah, I read it, and she talks about the people she saw on the island, and that's enough. Like, that's enough for me to get a sense of like, oh, okay, so that's going to probably be in the files in a much more concrete way in terms of how the FBI investigated it, and it's going to corroborate with the flight logs, probably. Like, right, I'm assuming, but there's just enough people from that are relevant today in politics that I think are embroiled in that it would affect a lot of House of Cards. Yeah, I think so. But I think because of that, that's why people are so much more interested in it, and it's so obvious that he was managed and he was removed, and all this other stuff around it. It's not equivocal to the UFO phenomena. I think the thing about UFOs is that there's got to be so many individual pieces of it that you could try to dole out that would assuage, or give people some temporary, whet their appetite. But as Dolan has posited, that is also House of Cards, where anything that you would voluntarily release would just cause a flood of more questions. Like, well, if you were keeping that secret, what about this other thing over here that references? Or what would you do to keep that a secret? How much money did you spend to do that? I mean, Gerb mentioned this in his Jesse Michaels interview. Like, they both sort of think that disclosure is never going to be voluntary on behalf of the state. Even if it's so effectively compartmentalized outside of the state itself within private industry, I just don't know how the powers that be could really realistically justify showing all their cards. It's going to have to be pulled tooth and nail. We're going to have to convince and protect these whistleblowers, I think. But I'll get off my soapbox. That's just kind of why I think people would think that is more immediately interesting, right? Because the political climate right now is just exploding. It's just, I don't know what it's like on your guys' news feeds or in your circles, but I can tell people in general are a lot more anxious and preoccupied with the state of the world and how it's all kind of feels like it's kind of unwinding and they can't really keep up.
Well, it's just something I've honestly been kind of struggling with lately is what is on topic, because especially with the psionics, the roof is really blown off of what some people consider on topic. And I'm pretty open-minded to these different ideas. I'm not sold on any one of them necessarily, but there was this guy, Dr. Eric Walker, who was, president of Penn State. He was on some boards for the defense industry for a long time. And he was asked, what do you know about UFOs? And he said, what do you know about psionics? And he said, if you don't know about psionics, you will never get to the truth of UFOs. And he just left it at that. And so, similar to all the compartmentalization in ufology, in these different contractors and stuff that work on the problem, you hear often that it's held back by over compartmentalization, stovepiping. And I just part of me gets a little bit paranoid sometimes that the sub might be doing that to itself. Like, putting up blinders and be like, oh no, that's off topic. Like, can't talk about that. But on the flip side, I do understand that. I understand that you do have to remain focused. There's sort of a threshold of proof to say that something is worth talking about or it's associated with the topic in a meaningful way. So I'm of two minds about it. It's not an easy question, but I see how that's related to a lot of the toxicity that we've been seeing. Some people are just like, this is off topic. What the hell are you guys talking about? Some people are like, you have to look at everything. So, I empathize with both sides of those user bases. Like, it's a frustrating topic, and there isn't a real easy answer there, I think.
No, I don't think there is an easy answer. And also, everyone has different worldviews. And I think, Let's Talk, you've mentioned this in a prior podcast, our last one. You said that different people are looking to get something else out of it. As we're a nuts and bolts person that may not reject, that might be, sold on materialism, may be thrown off by this, as we're someone else that maybe is like ultra terrestrial. I don't know why I picked that, but they might be into psionics because maybe there's lingering evidence there. I'm not sure, but it feels like sometimes we're operating with different worldviews, and there's different triggers. And sometimes someone could be a bad actor and use a specific aspect, doesn't matter what it is. And then people can say, hey, well, that equals bad now, which isn't the case, So maybe people have, claimed to be fortune tellers in the past, when they weren't, but there's legitimate people that can do that, let's say. So just because someone that existed that exploited this, it doesn't mean that whole topic is bad. So it's like landmines of that mixed with different worldviews, and that a conversation could trigger someone to feel that they're personally attacked, even if the person writing is not trying to attack them, because our worldview and our view of ourselves is kind of linked to it. So if someone attacks that view, like essentially you're attacking that person. And so it feels like a battle zone in the sense where there's so many obstacles to traverse. But the fact that you're mindful of that and, is, I think, encouraging, because I'm also wanting to stay on topic. And I tend to go toward nuts and bolts, which might be my own bias. Like, what can I prove definitively? That's why I like UAP Gerb stuff. He's talking about institutions that have been set up and connecting the dots, and it feels like there could be some catharsis at the end, or some resolve or whatever. Not this endless learning curve that stretches to infinity.
Yeah, so that Dr. Eric Walker quote was, unless you know what psi is and how to use it, you're not getting inside the UFO program.
Yeah, I think it's a contention that's going to continue, and it really will be fought out iteratively within real time as things become more relevant and considered. Some of us have been open to the notions of psionics, the reality of psi, the implications of psi and psi research, I think, for quite some time. And there have been prominent, reputable people like Dean Radin, for example, that have been doing good work in that space for decades. And so in my mind, it more is just people getting up to speed and understanding that, we can debate the ontological and evidential basis for a lot of those things already. There's enough information, I think, that it is statistically significant to look at in such a way that does not warrant outright dismissal whatsoever. And so if we can just use that as the platform, the base bottom platform, if people want to have a debate from a materialistic perspective, I think that there's room for that in the subreddit. It's really the underlying issue is this sort of toxicity or disrespect through which those debates are held, and then the extent to which someone will go to sort of close themselves off to either new information or not, or their unwillingness to present actual information, right, or context for their position. Whether is it based on some sort of evidence? Can we point to it? Can you inform us of how you came to that conclusion? Can you steelman my perspective? And there's only so much bandwidth for that in the context of arguing with people, anonymous people online. So I think we're in a good position to allow, a broader discussion. I mean, there are whole massive subreddits and sub communities that are devoted to very nuanced and I think legitimate aspects of the phenomena that we just don't talk about on the subreddit as much. I mean, our experiencers, our aliens, very big, very, very mature sub communities of people, I think, with genuine insight that they can bring to our desire to understand what the thing is in the sky. It challenges all levels of consensus reality, and normally consensus reality is the last thing to change. And so it's going to be people that seem like they're on the edge, or that some of us individually have to do the work to try to piece together and constellate the different people who are specializing in their own areas, and then kind of build a community or momentum around that, I think, to create these new frames. It's a lot of change, I think, for people to try to go through if they're coming from a fairly rigid, closed-minded, or materialistic frame. And so, not everyone's going to want to have that conversation in different spaces or have as much patience for everyone. I think we all approach that differently in our daily lives in terms of how eager you are willing to express either your enthusiasm or your understanding or some even just one point of thing that you watched recently and what the implications of it are to certain people. You just kind of have to figure out what people are able to hold space for, and there's a lot of stuff competing. So I digress. I think I get the impression we're in a good spot. It's more just a generalized toxicity that I think is exacerbated by systemic issues. Personally, I think that's what we're going to have to deal with, is a more ambient kind of anxiety and people's inability to reconcile the fact that they can't change certain things and that there are certain momentums just built into larger systems that aren't even just connected to our understanding of the world or what physics are or the reality of the phenomenon. So my username would have been Let's Talk Collapse if that wasn't taken. Instead, it's Let's Talk UFOs. So here I am.
Well, there was one thing I wanted to mention was speaking of this facade of infrastructure. There was a interview Jesse Michaels had on Beatriz, and then I'll just put it up on screen because I don't know the last one. But Beatriz talked about actually finding these plates and looking for objects in them that were there and that disappeared. And it's interesting because she illustrated a lot of interesting things about early astronomy. And there was a gentleman by the name of Don Menzel that actually purposely stopped this astronomical survey that they were running to capture these plates in between 1953 and 1967, which is just a travesty. Why would you do that? Not only that, he threw out some of these plates that she is now using, the ones that were recovered, but she's found these anomalous things.
A third of them.
Wow. And so it's so frustrating to hear that went on. What are you trying to hide, or why would you do this when literally science kind of sometimes thinks in hundreds of years, right? So this is an archive that is invaluable. You will never have the chance to redo this information. So it was a bad faith actor. But one of the more interesting things is there's a couple of notions about non-cosmological redshift, which I am just someone interested in astronomy. I didn't go to school for it. But what's fascinating is how we do distances of stars. it's not all triangulation. We can only do triangulation to a certain point. Otherwise, we don't have accurate enough instruments to actually measure the distance. So we use some interesting things. So if you check out the Hubble constant and the fluctuations there and just about redshift, there's some interesting things that are uncovered. And Beatriz mentioned that there was these two interacting galaxies with two separate redshifts on them, right? And that would just blow out of the water kind of our view on what this redshift is, which is a universe expanding. And it brings to memory something I heard a long time ago. There was a gentleman that was giving a lecture, but they mentioned at the end of a conference that we could actually just be in a slightly more dense position in the universe, and that redshift would be just the density, right? And so we calculate so many things based off of redshift. If that one thing is wrong, so many other things are wrong. But if there's one thing we can count on, we're always wrong, right? So we're consistently wrong about our views of what the universe is, whether it be the heliocentric model or germ theory. Just we are always uncovering new truths. So one of the things I tell my friends when they kind of look at me and I talk about UFOs, kind of they look at me like I'm silly. I'm like, well, how much do you think we know of what there is to know in its totality? Like 100% knowledge, you're God, you know everything. Everyone says that it's like a rounding error next to zero, right? So we don't even know 1%. And yet we say these certain things are impossible. And hearing Beatriz and hearing who I call true scientists, that anytime that you average a group of people, they're going to seem stupid. They're average consensus, right? If you take an average of us and we all try to do a test and we had to agree on every one, we'd probably fail it, right? But there can be individuals in those groups that actually stand out and that are like stars, or what I would call someone that is a role model, want to be more like. Beatriz is one of those scientists, I think. And I do think that, yeah, our institutions may have weird incentivizations where truth is not the end goal of them, it can be money. But I do think we should be actively investigating things that we're interested in. And even something as simple as we don't even know how far certain stars are from us could be a reality. And that just scratches the surface of this one video. So that's why I like the caliber of Jesse Michael's video, who he has on. And Beatriz, I can't pronounce her full name, but mad
Via
respect
Royale.
for her. Via Royale, thank you.
Yeah.
Mad respect for you, and keep it up. That gives me hope in our institutions of science.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned the heliocentrism, and there's the types of rhetoric that I like around the UFO phenomenon is the coming Copernican revolution. And I like to believe that we're on the precipice of a paradigm shift, just like when we, realized that the Earth was not the center of the universe. I think we will also realize that humanity is not alone in the universe, and that realization will mark a new paradigm for humanity, in that sort of broaden our perspectives and broaden our horizons on a collective level. And I optimistically look towards that shift in consciousness where it becomes commonplace for people to know that we're not alone in the universe.
I really liked how, kind of a tangent, but Beatriz was talking about her European crash retrieval organization, and she didn't answer many questions about it. But yeah, she has a crash retrieval team apparently, and she's got some leads.
She talks about that a little bit in her Soul Foundation talk as well. Yeah, I met Beatriz at the Soul Foundation, and I asked her if she wanted to come on Reddit for an AMA. She said she loved Reddit,
Nice.
but she hasn't responded to my emails. So hopefully she follows up on that. I'm a big fan of Beatriz.
Well, here's a shout out. If you see this, please reach back to Stinger.
Weren't you just interviewed by Chrissy Newton, Tom?
Yeah, I went on Chrissy Newton's podcast, Rebelliously Curious, just to plug Chrissy Newton, the journalist at The Debrief. She talked to me about my special interest, the intersection between UFOs and hackers. I'm fascinated by the hackers who targeted military and government computer systems looking for evidence of UFOs. A lot of people know about Gary McKinnon, but they don't know that Gary McKinnon is one of several hackers who targeted military and government computer systems. Before him was someone named Matthew Bevan. And before Matthew Bevan was someone who we only know the alias of, and that's the alias Quentin. I also have some other leads I'm following up on, but there's some interesting cases mostly from the 90s and a little bit from the early 2000s of these hackers. According to them, when they targeted military and government computer systems for evidence of UFOs, they say they found it.
It's amazing.
Awesome. So glad you're on there. Looking forward to watching it. Cool. I feel like that's a good stopping point. What do you guys think?
Yeah, well, so thank you everyone for your time today. We really appreciate, we know there's a lot of UFO media out there. For anyone who bothers to listen to what some lowly Reddit moderators think, we appreciate your time and your attention. We hope to have more of these conversations in the future. We're very open to your feedback. Thank you.